Sometimes the men who care the most pull away the fastest, and it feels like a punch you were never bracing for. One day you're held close, the next you're standing in the silence he left behind. You know that silence, the kind that feels thick, heavy, intentional. Not angry, not cold, just gone. A quiet, disappearing act you're supposed to pretend is normal. You replay the last conversation, the tone he used, the way he exhaled before answering, the text he didn't send back. And you tell yourself not to overthink it, but your body already knows something changed. It always knows before your mind catches up. There's this strange shift in the energy, like the air gets thinner, like connection becomes a place you're suddenly scared to step into, because you can feel him taking steps back. It's the little things that hit the hardest, not the big fights, not the dramatic moments, just the quiet, ordinary seconds where you can't reach him anymore. A message he opens but doesn't answer, a hug that feels distracted, a kiss that ends too soon, a laugh that doesn't touch his eyes. You notice everything, not because you're paranoid, but because women read emotional changes the way men read directions, automatically. It's instinct, it's survival, and in those tiny shifts, something in you tightens. Something whispers, this doesn't feel the same. You try to shake it off. You try to be rational, but your heart keeps tugging on the sleeve of your attention. And suddenly you're living in these small pauses, these strange gaps you don't know how to fill, these moments where his presence feels like a room with the lights turned off. He still says he cares. He still touches you gently. He still calls you baby or love, but something underneath isn't landing the same way. You catch him zoning out mid-conversation. You feel his hand go still in yours. You hear the way he says, "I'm fine," too quickly, like the words are covering something he doesn't want you to touch. You start to question yourself. Did you do something? Did his feelings change? Did you miss a sign you should have seen sooner? But that's the painful part. There was no moment, no blow-up, no argument, just this slow emotional fading, like someone turning down the volume on a song you love. And you live inside the wondering, inside the half answers, inside the unfinished sentences, inside the space he stopped sharing, because that's where the ache starts, not in the distance itself, but in not knowing why it's happening. And that's the part no one talks about. The confusion, the waiting, the exhaustion of trying to guess what's going on in someone else's heart. You start doing more, trying harder, being softer, reaching out first, covering for the gap he's creating. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself he's stressed. You tell yourself good men just get overwhelmed sometimes. And maybe all of that is true, but the truth doesn't make the ache any smaller. It just makes it harder to admit out loud, because deep down, you feel this shift in the dynamic, this imbalance in effort, this fear that his silence means something you're not ready to hear. You watch yourself shrinking without realizing it, taking up less emotional space, tiptoeing around his moods, editing your feelings so you don't pressure him. You ask fewer questions. You initiate fewer conversations. You give him more room than he ever asked for, because you're scared that if you take one wrong step, he'll disappear completely. And here's the worst part. You start apologizing for needs that are human, for wanting connection, for wanting clarity, for wanting consistency, for wanting the same intimacy he once gave freely. But this is where the emotional twisting begins, where your empathy turns against you, because women are taught to interpret silence as a puzzle they're supposed to solve, not a boundary he should communicate, not a responsibility he shares, just something you're expected to manage without complaint. So you step into the fixer role, the peacemaker role, the emotional detective role. You try to soothe what you can't see. You try to repair what you didn't break. You try to carry the weight he's quietly dropping. And this is the part that drains you, because love becomes work.
Connection becomes guessing. Safety becomes negotiation. But there's something deeper happening beneath the surface. Something most women feel long before they understand. a shift that isn't about your worth or your effort or your value. It's about his emotional architecture, the way men handle closeness, the way they panic when intimacy asks too much of them. Not physically, not sexually, but emotionally. Because here's the truth no one prepares you for. Men don't pull away because they stop caring. They pull away because caring exposes parts of them they never learned to hold. They distance when the relationship starts brushing up against old wounds, old expectations, old fears of not being enough. Fears they would never admit out loud, not even to you, not even to themselves. Women feel connection and move toward it. Men feel connection and sometimes brace. Not because they don't want it, but because they don't know how to stay open while feeling overwhelmed. It's not that your love suffocates him, it's that his vulnerability threatens him. And the easiest way for him to regain control is by stepping back, creating space, pulling his feelings into a place only he has access to. You take his distance personally, but he experiences it as survival, a way to quiet the emotions he doesn't fully understand, or trust, or know how to manage. This is the emotional mismatch no one teaches us about. You reach in when things hurt, he retreats. You share more when you feel disconnected, he shuts down. You express to create closeness, he withdraws to feel safe. And suddenly love feels like two different languages, two different instincts, two different survival strategies. This is where the frustration builds, because you're giving more, feeling more, trying more, and getting less. Not because he doesn't care, but because caring activates his defenses. A good man can still run. A loyal man can still shut down. A loving man can still distance. Not out of rejection, but out of emotional fear he can't articulate. And here's the revelation no one sees coming. He isn't pulling away from you. He's pulling away from the version of himself he's scared you might see. And then it hits you. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a small, sharp truth settling in your chest. He wasn't distancing because of you. He was distancing because of himself. Because something in him cracked the moment he realized how deeply you saw him. Men don't fear love. They fear being fully known. They fear the moment a woman looks past the mask and straight into the part of them they've spent their whole lives avoiding. He felt you getting closer. He felt you reading him too clearly. He felt your intuition touching the very places he keeps hidden. And instead of leaning in, he panicked. Not the kind of panic, the quiet kind. The kind that looks like pulling back to think. The kind that sounds like, I just need time. The kind that feels like being locked out of a home you helped to build. You were offering connection. He interpreted it as exposure. You were offering safety. He interpreted it as pressure. You were offering presence. He interpreted it as vulnerability he wasn't prepared to handle. Because here's the part women never see until it's too late. The more a man cares, the more it threatens the identity he built before you. The identity that says, don't need too much, don't feel too deeply, don't show weakness. You touch the part he doesn't show anyone. And instead of opening, he shut the door. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear he couldn't name. And this is the moment everything becomes painfully clear. He didn't retreat from your love. He retreated from the version of himself he's terrified to become. Because loving you demands emotional honesty, and that's the one thing he never learned to survive. He loves you. He just doesn't know how to stay open long enough to let that love land. And that's the heartbreak no one prepares women for. You didn't lose him. You just reached the depth he was never taught to swim in. And the truth finally sells like a knife and a cure at the same time. His distance is not your fault, but it is your answer.
You sit with it. You breathe differently. You remember moments that used to confuse you, the sudden mood shifts, the emotional hesitations,
The half-finished confessions he quickly covered with jokes, now they all make sense. And the realization stings more than you expected because it rewrites every memory, every soft moment, every time you thought you were too much. You weren't too much. He was too unprepared. You think about the nights you waited for clarity that never came, the apologies you whispered into the dark, the way you blamed yourself for tension you didn't create. And anger flickers. Not rage, just a small flame of, I deserved better. A quiet ache that says, I shouldn't have carried this alone. You replay the conversations where you tried to explain your feelings gently. And he nodded, but you could feel him disappearing behind his eyes. You remember trying to soften your truths so he wouldn't run. You remember holding back your needs because he looked overwhelmed by them. And now, you finally understand why. He wasn't overwhelmed by you. He was overwhelmed by the version of himself he thought he needed to be. The disappointment settles in, deep, steady, not dramatic, just honest. You find yourself going quiet, not out of fear this time, out of exhaustion, out of finally seeing the pattern clearly enough to stop chasing it. You don't slam the door, you don't beg, you don't break. You simply step back. And for the first time in a long time, you exhale a breath that belongs to you. And something shifts inside you. The storm that raged in your chest stops demanding attention. You start seeing the situation without the love blur, without the hope blur, without the maybe it's just stress blur. You feel everything slowing down, your thoughts, your heart, your expectations. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're waking up. You realize awareness is calmer than guessing. Boundaries are quieter than begging. Distance is softer than self-betrayal. You begin to understand that love doesn't require you to shrink or silence yourself or carry both sides of the emotional weight. His fear is real, but so is your need for emotional safety. And both can exist without one canceling the other. You can see his humanity and still protect your heart. You can understand his wounds and still refuse to bleed for them. You let the wisdom settle, slow, stable, clear. Because this is what healing actually looks like, not detachment, but perspective. Not coldness, but clarity. Not punishment, but peace. You realize you don't have to fix him. You don't have to decode him. You don't have to chase answers he's not ready to give. You only have to honor what your intuition already showed you. And in that moment, a quiet truth rises through you. This is what peace actually looks like. And when you finally look forward, it feels different, softer, steadier, more yours. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's readiness. You stop bending yourself around someone else's fear. You stop confusing his silence with your failure. You carry the lesson gently, like something earned, not bitter, not hardened, just wiser. You understand now, connection isn't about chasing someone into their shadows. It's about choosing someone who meets you in the light. You walk differently now, lighter, more awake, more whole. Because once you've seen the truth, you don't go back to begging for half love. You don't shrink yourself to fit someone's emotional limits. You don't mistake distance for depth ever again. You simply protect your heart the way you always deserved to, and the final truth sits warm and simple on your tongue. Protect your peace. Avoid pain. You've learned enough.